is that as we begin to see more, as I show more of the things that we have seen, that it would reignite the fire in you, that it would be like someone, what is that thing called, billow, the thing that stokes the fire, you know. I hope it stokes your fire, those little embers, that they'd start becoming ablaze again. Because honestly, what was different this morning was that I could picture, as you guys were singing, the different places that we walked and what I saw. And although at the time we saw so many things, it just didn't, I was just like the whole time, because I couldn't believe what they were excavating and what we could, it was just amazing to me. But anyway, so when we were singing, there's no place that I would rather be than in your presence. And the one thing that I saw, and I'll probably say this a lot until I stop saying it, was over the whole thing, the overarching thing that I saw was God's faithfulness. I saw his faithfulness when we are not faithful. How he, and I know I said it last week, but I can't think that it's just really fresh in my mind, just how all these Jewish people, they just didn't obey God, but yet, even though there were challenges and terrible things happened, he always saved a remnant. He did not forget his people, and he will not forget us. I just want you to keep that in mind, no matter where you're at, no matter what you're struggling with, no matter what you're thinking or doing at this moment, God is still present. He's still present. Okay. Anyway, Matthew 16. It was just at this place where Jesus asked his disciples this one very profound question. Who do you say that I am? So Jesus takes his disciples to a region of an area called Caesarea Philippi, where he asked this question. So when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do you say the Son of Man is? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others say Jeremiah, one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by the Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. And then he goes on to say that I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, so whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So when Jesus spoke this to Peter, it didn't just end with Peter. It's for us as well. So if you can picture this, there's this really dramatic scene where this particular confession, when Peter says this, when he responds to Jesus, is called the confession of Caesarea Philippi. So at this point, we know that the disciples have walked with Jesus for about 3 years. They listened to his messages, they listened to him teach, they witnessed the miracles. They had come to know this Jesus as a man. However, what set Peter apart from them was that Peter had a different understanding of who he was. What he knew is that he was the long-awaited Messiah. This Messiah that they've been waiting for so long. Jesus responds by blessing Peter, or Simon. He changed his name to Peter, which means the rock, and he declared that he would build a church on this rock, a church that Hades could not overcome. Hades, a lot of versions say hell. So it's at this gate, Jesus says, these gates of Hades will not overcome it. I mean, that's quite a promise, but really, what does that mean? A gate can't attack you. So what in the world was he saying? So what does that mean? What are the gates of hell that will not prevail? And I told you I'm going to show you these slides, and I also want you to think about what this means for you, because everything that happened in the scriptures is for you and me. So first we're going to look at that passage. We're going to look at the 3 parts to that. One part is gates, the second part is hell, and the other part is shall not prevail against. Prevail is the operative word here. So nothing shall prevail against the church. So the Greek word is, I cannot pronounce it, and it comes from two Greek words that mean against and upon. This is the word prevail. And the second part means to be strong and then to have strength. So what this means is to have strength, to have victory over your foe. It doesn't only mean that you'll have strength over to have victory over your foe. It's a military term, and it means that you'll have strength not just to overcome, but to win. And in the military, this is something that they understand. In order for an army to win, they have to go out knowing that they have the advantage. So Jesus is saying the gates of hell, whatever they are in your life and in mine, may fight against you, who are the church, but they cannot win. The truth is, the battles are going to rage. Been in a battle lately, anybody? The battles will rage. They can be long, they can be hard, and we know in real life soldiers die on both sides. But the gates still cannot win. They cannot take us out. You know, we may have, the gates of hell may win a few skirmishes, and they may even win a bunch of battles, but the truth is they cannot win the war. Jesus already won that war. You know, I had sent out to you, I know I put it on the WhatsApp, and I posted that message that Graham Cook. I hope you listen to it, because, and I know some of us have probably heard that message before, but I love what he says. He's got this one phrase that he says often: have another thought. And that whole message was about where you start from, because if you start from a place of defeat, where do you go from there? And the point of his message was, and I love the way he articulates things. I love the way he's just very loving. He's a lot more loving than I am, I think. I don't know. But he's got his whole demeanor is about the brilliance of the God that we serve. And I love that word. So if you haven't listened to it, please take the time to listen to it, because it's really, really encouraging. Because the truth is, you and I are in a battle. And we're going to have them throughout our entire walk. Okay, so hell. The phrase hell doesn't mean maybe what you think it means. We usually think of brimstone and the place where the men and women who do not accept Jesus Christ will go. And that place, it does exist. But that's not what he's talking about here. The Greek word Jesus is using here for hell is Hades. It does not refer to eternal torment. Did you know that one of the mythological Greek gods was called Hades? Hades comes from two Greek words, and it literally means not to see. Hades in the Bible is referring to the invisible realm of the dead. Like the word Sheol, it is shadowy. It's an unseen world where dead people go. It is simply the land of the dead. The Bible, as I said, does teach that people that do not accept the Lord will actually suffer at some point, and they will go to this place of torment. And that word in the Greek actually is Gehenna, and that's not the word that he's using here. Here it's speaking of this invisible realm, the realm of the dead. So Jesus is saying that the gates of the realm of the dead will never overpower the church. We will die, but this is a different place. You know, before Jesus came, people didn't overcome that place. So, what are the gates? A common Greek word which means entrance, which you pass from one realm to another. Gates serve two purposes. We know that they keep people in and they keep people out. You know, that whole boundary thing? It's a good picture. In Hades, if Hades is the land of the dead, what is the gate by which you and I enter into that realm? It's death. You have to die to enter the realm of the dead. Death is the gateway to Hades. So, while you're here, by the way, while you're here, you will die. I will die if Jesus should tarry. But really, while you're here, you are designed to overcome. Doesn't say you won't have challenges, excuse me, but it does say that we have the strength to have victory over our foe. We're designed to win, guys. So what then is Jesus saying? He's saying that and all its ugly power will never overcome the church that he is building. You are the church. I am the church. But there's something else that he knew when he said this to these guys. In verse 21, it's kind of interesting. It says, from this time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Now, to you and I, this is old news. We've heard it 1,000 times. But to these guys, they never heard this before. They didn't know that he was going to die and that he was going to leave them. That this man, remember, the Jewish population was expecting this man to come in on this horse and be like a warrior, not a suffering servant. So now when he's going to die, they're like, what? So when Jesus said the power of death will never overcome the church, he said it's because when he rose from the dead, he broke open the gates of Hades. As I said, up until that time, that wasn't the case. But Jesus did. He came and he took the keys. As a matter of fact, it says in Revelation 1:18, I am the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of keys of death and Hades. Now, how do you get those keys? You break the gate wide open. You die, and then you come back from the dead. That is why Hades, that's why death cannot hold you. That's why the gates of hell will not prevail. So while we were in Israel, we went to this place called Caesarea Philippi. It's up there. It's also called Benias, and it was also the place of Dan. So let me just give you a little background. So it's located on the slopes, the southern slopes of Mount Hermon, which Hermon, by the way, means, Caesarea Philippi means Philip's city of Caesar. It was built by Herod's son on a very large plateau at the foot of Mount Hermon, near the headwaters of the Jordan River. So the waters flow from there into the Jordan River. By the way, Mount Hermon is the tallest mountain in all of Israel. The city has a long, long history of pagan worship. First, we see the Phoenician god Baal. Then we're coming to the Greek god Pan, which we're going to look at in a minute. Pan was a Greco-Roman god of nature, livestock, and all that kind of stuff. And all things related to him into those times were wild, and they were party times, and of course, fertility. So Pan, let's see if I have oh, I didn't put him first. Okay. This is actually the gates of hell, by the way. So let me just finish this. So the word Pan means all. So he is considered wild. He's over the shepherds and the flocks and the mountains, and they get into all this ungodly type music. And he has the hindquarters, legs and horns of a goat, and in the same, like a fawn does. And he's actually named after another god. It's a lustful, drunken woodland god. That's what he was, one of those guys. So the centerpiece of the ancient worship site is this huge cliff and grotto. And what we learned that there are the remains, the things that they have uncovered is just unbelievable. So you see there are lots of altars, there are caves, and there are temples and courtyards that are in this particular area. The entire area is filled with Roman mythology and idolatry. So a cave near Caesarea Philippi was to be the birthplace of Pan, and which is where he lived, which is in there. It's just interesting that people, I don't know, I must be too logical or something, I don't know. It's hard for me to figure that they would worship someone that is so disgusting. Do you know that when I actually went to, and I'll show you the picture, I actually was looking at for pictures of him. They were gross. They were really gross. And I found the one that I thought would be, it's not as gross. I didn't bring a gross picture. Because all of the other pictures have his thing hanging out. And sex with animals, goats. There are actually statues with that. I don't know. Anyway. So in the pagan mind, the cave was believed to be the gates to the underworld where fertility gods lived during the winter. And they committed detestable acts, I mean, terrible things to worship these false gods. So here, what makes this unique is because it's at this particular body of water, and I know it had a name, do you remember what it was called? I couldn't find it. So this water actually went into the cave up here at one point. So it stood at the base of the cliff, and there was a spring water that actually flowed from it. And at one time, as I was saying, it actually directly came from the mouth of that cave, set at the bottom of that cliff. And that's where they believed that the gods lived, below the earth. Here's a better picture of that body of water. It's hard to imagine. I mean, things are so beautiful that things are so bad. That pagans lived there and they did these terrible things. Okay, so back in Jesus' day, they believed their fertility gods, as I said, lived in the underworld during the winter and returned to the earth during the spring. So the symbol of the underworld was thought to be water. And they thought that their gods traveled to and from the world through these caves. They believed that the cave and the water at Caesarea Philippi created a gate to the underworld. They believed that their city was literally at the gates of the underworld, called the gates of hell. In order to entice the return of their god Pan, each year these people engaged in horrible things, including prostitution and sex with animals, as I've said. Now, this particular cave that we just looked at was the center. It was called the abode of the shepherd pagan god. They did ritual sacrifices where they cast people into this natural abyss, reaching into the underworld waters at the back of the cave. So at the back of that cave, we'll look at some more of those pictures in a minute. If the victims disappeared in the water, listen to this, there was a sign, that was a sign that the god had accepted their offering. If, however, signs of blood appeared in the nearby spring, the sacrifice wasn't accepted. So here is the gate. This is, all of those dugouts in there are just places where they had other gods, including his father. They had a statue of his father. There was a statue made to him, and his Echo, who was his, I guess, his wife. I mean, think about this. They literally dug this stuff up. Here he is. This is also, by the way, where we get the word panic, because it was actually believed that if he wasn't worshipped, he would come at night and terrorize people. So we get from this god of Pan, panic. Now, this is the grotto of the god Pan. I wanted to read what it said. Oh, creepers. Oh. Okay, leave it. Oh, maybe I didn't bring it. No, I have the one about Nemesis. But it basically describes what he is and who he says. This cave is the nucleus beside which the sacred sanctuary was built. In this abode of the shepherd god, pagan cult began as early as the 3rd century BCE. The ritual sacrifices were cast into the natural abyss, reaching the underground waters at the back of the cave, as I read. If the victims disappeared in the water, this was a sign that the god had accepted their offering. If, however, signs of blood appeared in the nearby springs, the sacrifice had been rejected. Here it is. Now, this was filled with water at one point. There was this little opening here. It was interesting because that was one of the, I don't remember if that, I think that's where his statue was. What was interesting about that is it wasn't there, obviously. I couldn't get myself to do it, but people would go in there and have their picture taken in there. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't sit in this place that he stood. Not that I'm afraid of him, it's just that I don't know, I just couldn't do it. So here are the people walking out. This is inside the cave, the gate. So this water at one point was very, very high, and it would actually spring over into the other body of water that we saw. Pretty interesting, huh? Here would have been the shrine for him, Echo, the mountain nymph, which was his girl, and his father Hermes. There are lots of cutouts like that. You know, it's kind of interesting because, you know, people had to cut them out. You know, who did that? How did they do that? It just amazes me. Here's a closer look at them. Oh, this is the court of Nemesis. This is interesting. Nemesis was the goddess of vengeance and Roman imperial justice. Her long and narrow court was built in 178 CE in front of a great niche in which her statue was placed. A Greek inscription above the niche mentions the names of the goddess and of the donor. The pavers of the court were arranged in a checker pattern of white and reddish stone. They didn't, you know, that's the best picture we could get. This whole area was dedicated to all these different gods. Here again, here's the gate. So this is somebody's rendition of this, but I wanted to read to you. I had numbered them, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So number 1, this was called the Temple of Augustus. The second area, which is that gate, the Grotto of the Pan. The third place was the Court of Pan and the Nymphs. The fourth area was the Temple of Zeus. The fifth one was the Tomb of the Sacred Goats. And the sixth, the Temple of Pan and the Dancing Goats. So, I mean, they literally, you can see them a little bit dancing. But this is what the city would have looked like at one time. And so when Jesus brought his guys there, I mean, they had to be surprised because you have to remember, a devout Jew would never have gone into an area like this. I mean, they would have been unclean. So when Jesus takes them in there, they had to be thinking, what? So we also know that in Jesus' time, there was a temple that stood in front of that cave. And that cave was a very, as I said, in that grotto, in that hole, the gate, the pool was so deep, according to Josephus. It said it was a powerful stream, and it was so deep that they couldn't measure it. So the gate was believed to be the gates of Hades. Now, something else I want to say is regarding Peter. When the scriptures tell us that this rock, he was the rock, and upon this rock they would build their church. In the Catholic Church, they believe that that's where they get their priests from. That's where they get their pope from. Now, other Christians do not believe that. I was reading something about it yesterday. Excuse me. Because they believe that Peter was a special person, but if you go on and you read the book of Acts, Peter was just a guy. Because we already know, I mean, Paul addressed him because he was lying. He was one way with the Jews, and he was another way with the Greeks. So most people do not believe that. What they believe, which is what I believe, is that the church was built on Jesus and on the faith like Peter had. So if you have faith like Peter, and you're able to see Jesus as the Son of God, then Those are the people that God builds his church. And the church isn't just a building, it's a people. You and I are the church. So imagine this. Imagine the disciples walking into this. They sacrifice. Maybe they were there when blood came up through the water. Who knows? When Jesus brought them into this place, I mean, they were facing something that was very real to them, this place called Hades, a place where it had power from their perspective. And Jesus was saying to them, listen, guys, listen, when I die, which this is going to happen soon, because it was shortly after that that all took place, when that happens, I want you to understand that the reason the gates of hell cannot prevail against you, the church, is because I've already done it. I have taken care of this. So when you and I, excuse me, are up against anything in our lives, we have to remember that we have that very same power that raised Christ from the dead. If you don't have that reality as your base, like Graham Cook says, have another thought. Because one of the things that we see through all of Jesus' life, and we see through the lives of the disciples, is that the challenges they had were not designed to destroy them. They were designed to strengthen their faith, to strengthen their relationship with him. Graham says, he says, every challenge that you have, I'm not quoting him, but every challenge and opposition that you face is a time when the Lord will elevate you. Remember I was saying last week when I was talking about Peter, and Peter was restored when Jesus went back and he had this meeting with Peter. 3 times he asked him about loving him. Well, the thing that to me that was so profound about that was that he didn't just take him back to the place where he started. He said, now all that you've learned, Peter, all that you've learned, see, I told you on this rock I'm going to build. It's on what I've taught you, what you've seen, what you've experienced. Now take what I've taught you, and now teach my people. Be a shepherd to my flock. Now you're going to go out. I'm sending you out as one that will lead. Because you see, if you can have that thought, and if you can recognize the challenges that you have, hey, we all have them. The challenges you have, they can do one of 2 things. They can either take you out, they can become sinking sand, or they become a plateau or a place where you can go from there. Yeah, you learn from what you need, you learn what you need to learn, but you need to move forward. You need to take what Jesus has said here. You will have opposition. There will be challenges, but I am greater than all of those things. I am greater than all of those things. And if you allow me to work in your life, and you allow, if you will believe what I say, the gates of hell will not have power over you. The lies, the symbolism here is that it's the lies, it's the self-talk, it's the talk that people have, even things that people may have said to you. If you can grab a hold of the thought and not let it take a hold of you, these gates will not prevail. Does this make sense to you guys? I mean, do you understand that when God pulled you out of the dark place, he didn't take you out of there to put you back in a dark place. He pulled you out of there so that you can gain strength from him and understand that your future is good. Your future is good. You have eternity with the Lord. But it's now, how do you live that? You can't live it on your own. Jesus said, you need me. That's why I'm going. I'm going so that I can impart to you through the Holy Spirit. You'll have that resurrection power that enables you to be what I've designed you to be. You're not supposed to look like each other. We're supposed to look different. It's us working together, being the church, that we get to change the lives of some people. God bless you. I keep going back to, what in the world did those guys think when they showed up in that place? I mean, Jesus, have you lost your mind? I mean, you bring us to a place that we know is unholy. You know we're not allowed to be here. I mean, this was the place of death. You're bringing us here so that, why? What are you doing? I'd be asking that question. I'd be like, oh, what?
We do ask him that question.
Well, that's true.
He takes us, we're like, why are we here?
Well, that is true. Just like them. You know, and it feels like death. It feels like we're being overcome by, it seems like Satan is winning every time. It seems like, how long, God, do I need to fight here? How long? How long? How long? You know, I think about often about my son Stephen saying that when they went out on a mission, they never went out thinking that any one of them would die. Not a one of them. They always thought, because the statistics in that group of people was very few people died. And they expected that they would come back and that would be fine. They would be up against some real challenges. And the other thing that they expected, that they relied upon, was each other. You see, that's really what the church is supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be able to work with each other, help each other, love each other. You don't have to like each other. You know, like I love my kids. Fortunately, I really like them too. But how many people do you know that love their kids but really do not like them? Yep. So the point is that if we work together, if we are like, I'm thinking Stephen out on the field. Matter of fact, I was doing a ride along on Friday with a police officer. It was awesome. It's such a privilege. I wish that you all had an opportunity to do it. It is such a privilege to be with these men and women, to listen to them, to see where their heart is, to see how much they care about you, and which is why they do this. You know, the young guys come in, they're a little cocky, but it doesn't take them long before they're like slapped up across the head a few times. Reality sets in. But their hearts are right. You know, this gentleman I was with was is an Army man, and he just got back from a year of deployment. Just listening to his life, and he loves the Lord, and how he got to be a Christian, and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And the first call I was with them, we went to a woman's house who was having a break, a literal break. But if I could tell you, there were 4 men that showed up, all different guys. And if I could tell you how kind and how loving they were to her, how gentle they were with her, I think you'd be surprised. Not a one of them, even though they knew that things that she was saying were way out there, it didn't matter. They were so kind and so gentle. And it just amazes me. I've been in situations a few times now where I see that over and over again, and these are different men and women that I'm out with. They're just, I know they're bad apples everywhere. Give me a break. They're bad pastors too. So, you know, but it does make everybody bad. But it was just seeing how, even together, like when there was another situation that happened, and there were many police officers that were involved in this. And I sat in the car because I didn't want to get in the way. But each one of them had a different part in this particular situation. They even had helicopters coming in, and just to take care of a particular situation. And just watching them work together. Each had a different piece of the puzzle, but they were willing to work together. See, there was a guy in charge, but they all worked in agreement. I don't know how to, I wish you could just stand there. We're standing at this gas station, all these cars, the cops' cars, and all I'm thinking is, wonder if that gas station's thinking at this point. You know, I didn't know. But it was just really quite amazing. And actually, one of the other men that I met is a retired Navy SEAL. So, I mean, it's just kind of interesting being in this group of people that are serving you. They are serving you. They're doing their best to protect you and to do what they can to protect the people that are maybe not even well, or that are doing some things that they shouldn't be doing. And when I listened to them, like this man I was with on Friday, I kept thinking about, man, he's got the heart of the Father. His heart was, and God has us tucked away in all these different places, you know, in a store, in a garage, you know, it doesn't matter. He's got us tucked into, he's placed us in all these places so that, see, that Satan won't prevail. You see, because we're the light. We're the light in that dark place, you know, in that place of the dead. We're the light. And you see, we've waited so long. We've stood back for so long and not allowed ourselves to be seen. I think it's time to stop. It's time to come out and to be the voice, to be just like Jesus stepped into this pit of hell. I don't know what else to call it. And he was the light. They rejected him, but he was the light. But he was teaching his guys, listen, see, this is supernatural. This is beyond what you can see. This is beyond even what you might feel. Because if you take this one step further, the scriptures tell us our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and the principalities of the air, right? That's them. That's the physical form of them, of those principalities and those powers and those evil things. The scriptures tell us that when we're up against all those things, we are to stand firm. Standing firm for your kid? Jenny, how long have you stood for your daughter? How long? Satan will not win this battle. He will not. Because her mother is standing there and saying, no. We're that light. We're the one. Peter, who do you say that I am? The disciples are like, think about this. It was shortly after that he was killed. And they were so afraid they scattered. Who was at his cross? A couple of women? John? Peter denied him. But Jesus knew that this was not a flesh and blood battle. He knew. So he brought these men to this place and he said, you see all this? This will not prevail. This will not take you out if you know who you are. See, Peter knew. Peter knew who Jesus was, and then he knew who he was. He learned that after the resurrection. But they cannot win if you know who you are and you take your post, you take your position, and you link arms with those around you that love you and that will stand with you. We're not perfect, man. We make a lot, I'll speak for me, make a lot of mistakes. So hell is not on the offensive. The church is. We're it. The church is marching into the hells of this world, ready to reclaim every square inch for Christ. And when we storm the gates of hell, Christ said that we will not fail. We will prevail. So it's time for us to put the devil on the run. Stop cowering. It's time to save souls and destroy the strongholds. It's time to reclaim this world for Christ. How do we do that? How? Become a friend. Love somebody that doesn't know the Lord. Be honest. Be real. Be true to your word. Be that peculiar people that Christ says we are. And see if it doesn't affect the person that's in your sphere. And I'm willing to bet that if any one of you were to take a minute and look at all the contacts you've had since you've been saved, how many people have thought that you were different? They may not have liked it. You might have offended them because Jesus offended plenty. But they knew something about you. How come you're smiling so much? How come you're happy? You shouldn't be happy. How come you keep doing this over and over and over again when it doesn't look like it's going to work? You know, those kind of